You have more ways to connect with people than any generation in human history. Messages delivered instantly. Notifications telling you someone, somewhere, acknowledged you. Hundreds of connections, always within reach. And yet, you can still feel completely alone. Not because you're isolated, but because connection and feeling connected are not the same thing. There are nights when you put the phone down, look around the room, and realize that none of it touched the part of you that needed to be seen. This isn't a personal failure. It's a psychological pattern affecting millions of people. And it's getting worse, not better. Because the real question isn't whether you're connected, it's why you can be surrounded by connection and still feel alone. You are more connected than any human being who has ever lived. More reachable, more visible, more documented. And yet, something about that sentence probably doesn't feel entirely true. Because there are moments, maybe frequent ones, where all of that connection lands without weight, where the phone goes down, the room goes quiet, and something underneath everything else makes itself known. Not loudly, just persistently. This video is about that feeling, not the obvious loneliness of isolation, the kind with a clear cause, but the quieter kind, the kind that exists inside a full life, inside a busy schedule, inside a contact list that never stops updating. Psychologists have been studying this phenomenon for decades, and what they've found is more precise than most people expect. Because this isn't about how many people you have. It's about whether your nervous system ever registers that you're truly known. In the next 12 minutes, you'll understand why the brain can register contact without registering connection, why proximity and presence are not the same thing, and why the void so many people carry quietly makes complete neurological sense. Once you see it clearly, the silence stops feeling like a personal failure and starts feeling like information. Picture a Friday night. You're not alone, you're surrounded. A dinner, a party, a gathering of people you know. Conversation happening everywhere. Phones out, photos taken, laughter in the background, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, you notice something quiet and unsettling. You're performing, smiling at the right moments, responding when spoken to, present in every way that can be measured, and absent in the only way that matters. Nobody notices. That's the part that stays with you afterward. Not that the night was bad, not that anyone was unkind, just that you moved through the entire evening like a background character in someone else's story. You were there. You participated. And when you got home and the door closed behind you, the silence felt louder than the room you just left, like the connection had been surface level the whole time. Psychologists refer to this as social disconnection, the gap between being around people and actually feeling known by them. And what makes it so difficult to recognize is that from the outside, everything looks normal. You're connected, you're social, you show up, but beneath that surface, something else is happening. Something the brain interprets very differently from what it appears to be. In the 1970s, sociologist Mark Granovetter proposed something that would become essential to understanding modern loneliness. He argued that human relationships exist on a spectrum, from strong ties, the people who truly know you, to weak ties, the casual contacts that orbit your life, and the digital world quietly shifted most interaction toward the weak end of that spectrum. Weak ties are easy. They require little vulnerability. Little presence, a like, a reply, a brief exchange, enough to signal contact, but not enough to create intimacy. Psychologist John Cacioppo, who spent decades studying loneliness, found that loneliness isn't determined by how many people you interact with. It's determined by whether you feel understood by them. The brain isn't measuring proximity, it's measuring depth, and most digital interaction was never designed to provide it. When someone likes your post or sends a message, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in social bonding. For a moment, it feels like connection, but dopamine responds to signals, not meaning. The brain registers that someone noticed you. It doesn't register whether they know you. Over time, this creates a subtle mismatch. The brain receives repeated signals of contact without the emotional resolution of true connection. So, it keeps reaching, refreshing, checking, hoping the next interaction will finally satisfy what the previous ones didn't. It rarely does. Because real connection depends on signals, digital interaction often removes. Eye contact, tone, presence, the unconscious cues that tell the nervous system it's safe and seen. Without those signals, the interaction ends, but the need doesn't. For some people, this gap feels sharper. Research on attachment patterns shows that individuals who are more sensitive to social signals are also more sensitive to social absence. A delayed reply, a conversation that ends abruptly, silence where response was expected. The brain fills the gap automatically, not with neutral explanations, with threat. And over time, something quiet begins to happen. A person can spend hours connected, scrolling, responding, interacting, and still finish the night feeling untouched by any of it. Not because connection wasn't available, but because the brain was never designed for connection without presence. Think about the last time you were in a conversation, in person, where the other person wasn't fully there, their phone face down, but their attention somewhere else. Responding, but not really tracking. Present physically, absent psychologically. You felt it immediately, not as a thought, as a sensation. Something in the body recognized the absence before the mind could explain it. That's the nervous system reading presence. And it's far more precise than most people realize. Now think about how much of your daily interaction happens without that signal entirely. A message sent, a reply hours later, a reaction on a screen. Each exchange technically counts as connection, but the nervous system receives none of the cues it evolved to trust. No eye contact, no tone, no shared physical space. Only information, not presence. And over time, the brain begins to register the difference. This is why someone can spend hours scrolling, seeing constant proof that other people exist, and still close the phone, feeling strangely untouched by any of it. The interaction happened, but the connection didn't. And because the brain can't easily name what's missing, the feeling gets misattributed to fatigue, to mood, to stress. Almost anything, except the real cause. And that's how modern loneliness sustains itself. The first thing worth understanding is that this isn't solved by disconnecting, removing the apps, logging off, disappearing from the platforms. That removes the stimulus, but not the need underneath it. Because the brain doesn't need less interaction. It needs to feel someone is actually there. Even briefly, even imperfectly. A single moment of real presence can regulate the nervous system in ways hours of digital contact never do. The second shift is learning to recognize the difference between contact and connection. Contact is frequent, efficient, constant. Connection is slower. It leaves an emotional trace. One fills your time. The other changes how you feel when you're alone afterward. And the brain knows the difference, even when you try not to notice it. The final part is the one most people avoid. Real connection requires visibility. Not the edited version, not the controlled version. The version that's still uncertain, still forming. Because the nervous system doesn't resolve loneliness by being seen perfectly. It resolves it by being seen honestly. And that's the kind of presence no platform was ever designed to simulate. There's a particular kind of courage in admitting that you're lonely in a world that gave you every tool to avoid feeling that way. That the notifications didn't fill it. That the conversations helped, but didn't reach it. That something underneath all of it has been quietly waiting. Not for more contact, but for something that actually lands. That's not a flaw in you. It's a limitation of what we were taught to call connection. And recognizing it, clearly without self-judgment, is the beginning of something different. Not a solution, a direction. Because the void doesn't close when you find more people. It closes when someone finally sees you and stays long enough for your nervous system to believe it. And that has always been the thing no technology could replace. Connection was never meant to be convenient. It was meant to be felt. And somewhere between the invention of the feed and the normalization of the notification, those two things quietly separated, close enough to look the same, far enough apart to leave people empty in ways they couldn't fully explain. What you carry isn't weakness. It's a nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do, searching for the signal that actually resolves it. Not more contact, not more visibility, but the felt certainty that someone, somewhere, truly sees you and stays. That search is worth taking seriously, not by optimizing your social life, not by finding the right platform, but by noticing which connections leave your nervous system calmer and which ones leave it unchanged. Because the opposite of loneliness was never proximity, it was presence. If this changed how you see the quiet moments, your own or someone else's, tell me in the comments. I'd like to know what resonated. To continue this understanding, watch the next video here. And to understand human behavior at a deeper level, subscribe. We decode psychology every week.